OIW
Hello, all my beautiful people. It's time for another fun episode, and I am really excited about the guest that I have on this week. He is co-author for a book called Village Wisdom. It's an excellent book. You are going to really enjoy this one because it has a lot to do with dads. So this is going to be a very dad-centric episode. I feel this is right. It's the day after Father's Day as this comes out. So we just got done celebrating dads, and so all my dads, listen to this one. It's a great episode, and try to get your hands on one of these books. His name is John Christensen. Like I said, he is the co-author of the Village Wisdom books. He's here to talk about that today. It's a book about 6 dads giving their perspective on all kinds of different subjects when it comes to being a father. And really enjoyed this. He reached out to me a few months ago. He sent me a copy of the book. I've got to read it, and I am very excited to have him on. And for those of you who are here just to listen to the John Christensen episode, welcome. I hope that you enjoy what you hear, and I hope that you stick around and listen to some of the other great episodes I have here as well. So, if you guys are as excited as I am, then let's get this show on the road.
If you give a dad a podcast. Hey, Dad.
So where did you actually train at?
I made a really good career out of being able to bump, sell, and I had a punch me face.
I wasn't about to call you dad, so.
Seriously?
I felt like I was in an anime or something.
People get really mad at those videos for some reason. Like it triggers certain people. Yeah.
Wow.
I was actually lost as an infant, and I was taken in by a traveling group of independent wrestlers.
I love it. I'm excited for this one.
Bro.
You get punched in the face on the daily.
Do you always do these interviews with your shirt off?
What?
Man, this guy won't shut up.
All right, everybody. So today I have with me John Christensen. He is the co-author of a book that I actually got sent to me. It is called Village Wisdom. He is also a dad. This is a really cool book that I've got to start reading, and it's a really cool concept behind it. And it's 6 dads that kind of give you their insight into different things that go on as a dad. And so I have him on here today to kind of talk about that book. Very excited to talk with him. John, how are you doing tonight?
I am fantastic, Jared. Thank you for having me.
You know, I love this. This is a really cool book. You know, you reached out to me a few months ago, I think it was, about coming on here and talking about your book. And you kind of told me a little bit about it. And I love doing things like this because, you know, I'm a dad myself. And I don't consider myself to be a perfect dad in any way. And so it's always nice to have somebody who can maybe help you along the way or give you their insight into something. And that's kind of what this book is you give insight from your perspective on things that have happened with you. So, you know, I really do love it. I love the format of it too, because it's not just you, it's multiple dads.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. It's, you know, the book, it's certainly not a manual for perfection, but it gets us that much closer, right? I feel like if I were to ever reach the summit of the perfect dad, like it would be a really lonely and boring place, you know, just because I think those imperfections, and same with like your spouse, right? Like I absolutely adore my wife. Like she's not a supermodel, but she's my supermodel, you know? Right. Yep. And honestly, and I've said this to anybody that'll listen to me, but I think my wife specifically, like her beauty comes from the inside. She just happens to have a beautiful exterior as well. But you know, and I think that the same could be said for dadding, you know, and fatherhood, in the sense that, you know, there is a lot of imperfections with all of us dads. You know, nobody's perfect, but it's those imperfections that makes us unique and, you know, worthwhile to our children, you know. So yeah, it was just really cool to get those 5 other dads along with myself and just kind of get their perspective and to capture it into something. And and it's relatively, I mean, it's a heavy book. It's like 300 and some pages, but it's relatively light in the grand scheme of fatherhood, right? I mean, if you and I sat down to write a book and didn't have, a limit or a regulator on there, we could probably, write it for the next 6 years, and it could probably be 10,000 pages, and it wouldn't even start to even get close to what perfection would look like. But yeah, super excited for it, man. It's been out for about 5 months now. And it's been a bit of a slow burn, and we've had some good days and some bad days as far as like traction. But I say bad just because, there'll be times where we don't get any site hits. And there'll be times where, 20 book orders roll in, and it's just really cool, man. I am so happy to talk to you about it, to talk to your audience about it, to talk to anybody that'll listen.
Well, I know that before we started recording, you were telling me that you've been losing sleep over this, actually, because the amount that you've of passion that you've put into this project.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. This whole book really stemmed from me starting to journal, and I really wanted to leave something that would be lasting, almost like a legacy of sorts, for my kids to read. And when I started journaling, it was, I was in the middle of a job transition, actually. And I started thinking about things to like augment our finances, because I was changing jobs, and we were going to take a little bit of a hit financially, and nothing that we can't weather, but I just wanted to do more for my family. We had just come back from a vacation that we had planned a year in advance. Yeah. And I wanted to do more of that, and so I started journaling, and I couldn't stop. I've always been really fond of writing. I'm certainly not a writer, and anybody that picks up the book is going to be like, yeah, John is definitely not a writer. But but what I'm hoping comes across is like, my emotional kind of like vulnerability, like I will hide nothing. And my wife actually jokes about some of the inconsistencies in the stories, because she remembers it a different way, so it's kind of cool to see like different perspectives,
Yeah.
But yeah, I started journaling about 7 or 8 months ago, and I kind of, the writing kind of started to grow on me. And then, fast forward a little bit to the book being published, and it's been this whole beast. Writing the book was easy compared to what we're doing now with trying to like, get it out to the masses, and just trying to bend people's ears for 45 seconds just so I can describe the book and kind of pique their interest, But I will, there's been nights often that, I'll stay up till midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning. And, I get up at 5 and 6 a.m. To start my day and get the kids ready, and maybe get a workout, maybe drink a cup of coffee, and then off to the normal 9 to 5. But, it's been borderline addiction, and it's something, and you had said too that you're like this with the podcast, but it's a passion project for sure. Yes. And it's something that I don't feel bad about. There's been times where, for my normal 9 to 5, I'm in IT. And so there's times where I'm on call, and I'll get paged in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 in the morning. And, I'll have to fix something, and I'll go to bed mad, like I like, why did they wake me up for that BS,
Yeah.
And, but, for the past, like I said, I mean, it's been months, and it's, I imagine that there's going to be some sort of health effects later on down the road for me staying up so late, but I'm hoping they're not too bad. But, I've been staying up super late, and it's gotten to the point where like, I'll stay up till like 1, writing down notes, and I'll finally, I'll put the pen down, I'll turn my phone off and put it on the nightstand, and I'll roll over like, all right, I'm just going to go to sleep. And then like within like a minute, like I'm like, and I'm rolling back over, and I'm writing things down, and I can't turn it off. Yeah. I have to forcibly put myself to sleep. It's pathetic, but it's amazing.
Yeah, I know how it is, and you have these ideas that just run through your head, and you have to do it right then, because I'm scared. You're scared that if you don't do it right then, you're going to forget it. I mean, you're a dad. things go right through your brain if you don't write it down right then. I mean, as we're recording this, I have a notepad in front of me because I know how bad my memory is. I have to do that, or otherwise, as I'm doing these interviews, I'll forget what we're talking about, and it'll end up being a 20-minute conversation, because I'm like, what we're going to talk about next,
I'm the same way. I'm lucky that I have two kids that love to write and love to draw, and they love to make menus for fictitious restaurants and movie theaters that they set up in their rooms,
Yeah.
But they're constantly stealing my notepads. And so I have notepads all strewn across the house. And it's funny because I'll be like writing notes and I'll be really into it, and I'll go to flip the page and there's a picture of a unicorn with a fairy and a dragon like slaying it, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll go to the next page. But yeah, I'm the same way, man. Notepads are my friend.
Yes, most definitely. I tried using my phone at first as a way to write stuff down, but there's just something about having the actual pad of paper in front of me that I really enjoy, being able to do it that way.
Yeah, and it's almost like a puzzle too. I don't know if your handwriting's as bad as mine, but trying to understand the thoughts in the morning, like, man, I don't even understand. It looks like hieroglyphics sometimes, but yeah, I totally get that. Writing it, and I think it's a little bit faster too. With tapping on your phone, especially when you're tired. Right. I've done that too, and that's how I started this. And it's just the autocorrect just kind of slows you down.
Right. Well, and you got to go and find the app and all that. Unlock your phone, find the app. Yeah. With this, you just grab a piece of paper and write it down. So yeah, no, I totally get that. So you have 5 other dads that do this with you. How did you rope them into doing this?
Man, I'll tell you, and there's so much to unpack just with that. So, I consider myself an eternal introvert, and, I wasn't always introverted. I was very much extroverted until about the age of 23. I was doing a lot of partying in my so-called college years, enough to where my college years became dropout years. And that's ultimately what led me to the military. I ended up helping. I was kind of a deadbeat. I wasn't doing much, and I saw all my other friends, going to college and making a life for themselves. And I was still in my hometown in a rented apartment. And on a couch that I got at a yard sale for like $30. Like I was just not going anywhere in life, dude. It was pathetic. And but I was out partying every night, and I was doing extroverted things. And so for a multitude of reasons, I ended up joining the Army, where basic training, they tear you to shreds, man. It's like a blender, and they rebuild you into the person that they think you should be. And I bought into that hook, line, and sinker, and I still to this day believe in it. And I'm a better man for it. And in some ways, I do believe that the Army saved my life, man. And so it crafted me into the person that I am today, which happens to be an introvert. But it's also, I'll tell you, it's hard to make friendships now. The Army kind of redefined what friendship is, in the terms of, you don't know the person that's 50 meters from you, hiding behind a car, but he's got green pajamas on, and it's the same color as yours. Yeah. And you lay down your life for him, or her. Yep. And so that's a different kind of friendship. Some would say it's like a family. And so really, ever since the Army, I've really struggled to make friends in a sense. And when we had kids, they're 7 and 9 now. My oldest, my son, is 9, and at the time, my wife and I were very career oriented, and we felt the need to progress our careers so that we could support these kiddos. And so we found somebody that was literally 10 doors down from our house. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she ended up watching. I say watching very loosely. She raised our son, and her husband is actually Javi, who is a co-author, and he was the first guy I went to. I had this thought. Since over these past 9.5 years, we've become incredibly close with their family. And so Javi was the first person I texted, and I was like, hey, I know this is crazy, and if you don't want to do this, you can tell me. They're very open and honest with us. We're very open and honest with them,
right?
And we treat each other like family. But I had the confidence and the humility, the fear. I mean, it was just a lot going through my head. There's been a lot of times where I've typed out a text to him for help, and I'll just like delete it before I send it. Like, nah, I sound too whiny. Like, I start like over analyzing things. But but that night I sent it, and that text changed my life. And so it was a long, I'm a writer. I'm not a very good one, but I'm a writer. And so it was like this long text, and I didn't want to have to type it out again for another friend that I had, Casey, who's also a co-author now. So I just copied it, right? And I copied it, and I went to paste it to Casey. And before I could hit send, sending it to Casey, Javi had already replied and was like, yeah, dog, I'm in. When do you want to start?
That's cool.
And so it was so cool, man. Reading that text, like my heart, I was laying in bed, my heart just like melted through my chest, through the mattress. And there was just such a sigh of relief, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we ended up, so Javi and Casey, Javi's brother-in-law, Steven, who's an amazing guy and obviously a really good dad. And then Javi's father-in-law is Trent, who we refer to as T-Rex, but he's a dad in the book. He's got 8 kids, 9 kids. I can't keep them all straight, but he's got a lot of kids, man. And so he understands this fatherhood stuff.
Yeah.
And then Casey, obviously, and then I got my dad to do it. And so it's a really fascinating group of dads, and it's really cool.
That is really cool. So when you first look at the book, the cover of it has a very unique look to it. You've got the coffee ring on the back of it. You've got the splatters and things like that. So it's a very unique look to the book. Is there significance in that look that you gave to the book?
I'll tell you, the significance is that there is no significance.
Okay.
And I started listening to a lot of podcasts, really over like the past year to 2 years. With COVID going on, everybody and their brothers seem to like start up a podcast, and so there's a lot of really good material, much like yours. There's a lot of really good material out there that doesn't have like large, million follower, audiences. Yeah. But the material is still just as amazing. It's just because so many people started up. There's not enough ear holes that can listen to all the podcasts at once, so eventually all the good stuff is going to float to the top. But I started listening to a podcast, and somebody had mentioned like how, I think they were referring to like Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, about his books and how he doesn't really put much effort into the covers. And I kind of thought about that with ours too. Like I just never had a concern. My dad has published, I think it's like 2 or 3 like fiction novels, and so he's really into writing as well. But he always put a lot of time into his covers, and would complain about the illustrators like not getting back to him in time, and how the covers took like months and months, and it was just really annoying. But I didn't see any real reason to have like a flashy cover. And I get it. If we wanted to sell this thing at like Barnes and Noble or some, big box stores, then sure, probably having a flashy cover might help, but we really, the goal of this book was honestly to give it to our kids, right. And as we started talking about it with other, we just be having conversations about the prompts and the questions. And people would, hear the conversation and be like, what are you guys talking about? Like, that sounds interesting. I want to read, And so that's ultimately what led to like us successfully, funding a Kickstarter to get this thing off the ground. But really, like, I think the content of the book, I want the content of the book to stand on its own 2 legs. And I don't want some artist's, depiction of it that doesn't even know us to be the differentiator, you know?
Yep.
And so when the publisher came back and was like, what do you want the cover to look like? And I was like, I want it to be a hardcover. I want it to look like it's been beat up, that it's been through it.
Yep.
And something that can, stand the test of time. And I told him, I was like, my plan for this book is to have it sitting on somebody's nightstand and there to be coffee rings, from the wear and tear.
Right.
And so that's what they came back with. And I was probably the easiest client that publisher has ever worked with. They came back with a cover and I was like, yep, great, ship it,
Yeah. Well, I saw it, and that's exactly what I thought was, okay, this is a book for dads, and they're going to do this as they can, and so having the coffee rings and stuff on there, it was for me, it felt significant because it's something that you would see. There's a lot of things that I have as a dad that I use every day, and they look beat up, and it's because of the use that I'm getting out of it. As a dad, sometimes we're more rough on things,
For sure.
I really liked that. That was the first thing that caught my eye, and that's cool that it was just throw something on there, because that's a very dad answer also.
That, and it would have been so expensive to like license like the New Balance logo and all, nobody's got time for all that.
So how did you come up with the topics that are in the book?
Yeah, so and that, man, I wish I was better at that. At the time, and the way this book started off, like it was just going to be the six of us just journaling for 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen was like, oh man, we should have topics. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. That'll probably give it a little bit more structure,
Yeah.
And so we started Googling them. I think we came up with a few on like ChatGPT or something,
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't really put a whole lot of, and this is more dad stuff, we didn't really put a whole lot of effort into the topics either, which, so we finished the book towards the tail end of January and the first couple of days of February. And so we've been doing a ton of work with that, but we also recently, I think we're in like day 13 of doing the mom's edition.
Oh, cool.
And so with that book, we've actually put a ton of thought into the prompts. Like the prompts are pretty well targeted and defined.
Yeah.
But ours, typical dad stuff, we're like, oh yeah, that looks like an interesting question. Let's throw that in there, and then eventually we just kind of boiled them down to 30 prompts. But I do think it's fascinating because there's like a therapeutic element to the questions and some of the responses that they elicited,
Mm-hmm.
And I was just blown away. And the questions are kind of similar along similar lines as the book cover, in the sense that anybody can ask a question, and we really tried to target what we were cerebral about was the questions, as far as we wanted questions that we've never been asked before, or stuff that our kids would never think to ask us. Most of us have younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously my dad, Scott, and Trent, have older children, but
right.
The other four of us, we all have younger kids, between the ages of 13 and 5,
Gotcha.
And so we just wanted questions that they wouldn't think to ask us, or that we thought they wouldn't think. A little bit of inception there, but man, some of these responses, I was just blown away at how vulnerable everybody was. It was just so cool to read, man. I'm super proud of it.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's an easy read. I've really been enjoying it. I pick it up every chance that I get to read it and everything, and I love how it flows. And you can tell that it's just dads talking and telling you their experiences and stuff, and I really like that. Which brings me to the next part. After you get through that topic, then there's pages behind that where you can write down your own experiences and stuff. How did that come about with you guys deciding to put that in there?
Yeah, so that was from the beginning, if I recall correctly. So I started, this whole journal process. So really what happened with the root of this book was that, I started journaling. my organization left much to be desired, and I started like rewriting some of my journal entries. Like most of them were kind of like small business ideas, and of course I'd like talk about like what I did with during the day with my kids or with the family, yada yada. Right. But when it came to some of the small business ideas and concepts, like I found myself kind of like, I've already written about this. Like, where did I write this? And I started looking, I couldn't find anything. And so I was like, all right, I got to start a blog, and just to add more structure to it. And so I started a blog, and halfway through that first blog, I started thinking about how amazing it would be to read this was essentially a journal, how amazing it would be to read my dad's journal.
Right.
And then I kind of went, like, I drilled a little bit deeper, and I was like, man, how amazing would it be to read my dad's journal, and
yeah,
I just couldn't stop thinking about like what his handwriting would have looked like, and what his thoughts would have looked like. And like, I'm talking to you, thousands of miles away, and I've got a screen in front of my face that can play render graphics that look like you're there.
Right. Yeah.
and my grandfather would have no idea what that was. Right. He would think that we had like a window into the future or something, and so I just kind of started thinking about like, what he would think of where we are today. And then like a light bulb moment clicked, and I was like, we have to like, and I think this is the best part about the book is that we left that intentionally blank space so that, the reader can leave their own notes and responses. And I went from, it was like a yo-yo effect. I went from thinking about my dad's journal to my dad's journal, my grandfather's journal, and back to my son, and I started thinking about like, man, what if my son left his notes in here for his future kids? And then what if his future kids did the same? Like like that generational wisdom aspect.
Yeah.
It just threw me for a loop, and that's really what's been kind of like the hook, I think, for most of the conversations that we've had surrounding the book. Like the book's written, but it's not like it's about finished. Halfway written. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, with any luck, it'll never be finished.
Right. Yeah, and I really like that. The fact that I can do that because I have a son myself. And maybe one day he's like, no, I'm never having kids, I was like, oh, do you see how crazy you guys are, right? So you don't want kids then. But, maybe one day he will have kids, and I'll be able to pass this down to him. That way, he'll see my perspective on it as well, raising him and his sister. So I do. I really like that idea. It stands out. It's different. It's not something that you see in some of these books. They like to give their advice. They like to put out what they're going to say, and that's it. But this, you want other people to be able to put their input into it. I really appreciate that in the book.
Yeah, like I'm sure you remember it. Every dad has to. I definitely remember mine. But do you remember leaving the hospital with you have a son?
Yes.
You remember leaving the hospital with him?
I sure do.
Man, like, if I would have had this book in the car with me on that ride home, I would have felt 10 times better.
Yeah.
I remember, they even if your wife can walk, they still roll her out in the wheelchair, and you still help her into the car. And then you leave the parking lot, and you're like, what do we do? And that fear just overwhelms you, right? Like you have no idea what to do. And I certainly didn't. Yep. So I just think back to those moments like, man, I wish I had this then.
So I remember two things. One, I drove only taking right turns when I left the hospital because I didn't want to cross traffic, for one.
Man, what a gentleman and a scholar. Wow.
Yeah, I was just in my now ex-wife and everything. She still makes fun of me to this day about how I drove us home that day. But and the other thing I remember is right after he was born, I went to go get some food or something like that because they were both resting, and they were like, this is a good time for you to get some food. And by the time I got back to the hospital, And I wish I still had this, but it was on a phone that I don't have anymore. I think it was like the very first iPhone. It was like the iPhone 3G or whatever it was, and I don't have it anymore. Yeah. But I wrote, like, I was so inspired that I was a dad that I started writing stuff down in the phone, things that I wanted to tell him. And I wish I still had that. If I would have had this book, then I would have still had that,
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Any of you guys who aren't a dad that's listening to this episode right now, get your hands on one of these books. That way you can have that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh man, that would have been amazing if you still kept that. But yeah, I totally agree. And it's something that, I like the format that we went with because, there are going to be, father's wisdom, I guess you could call it. We do. But, there's going to be stories that you just can't relate with, right. And that's fine. I listened to a podcast recently, and they were talking about how, in modern culture, we typically seek out advice or guidance or articles or news that we relate with, that fits like our mindset or what we believe, and it kind of like limits you, right? If you only read about the things that you already know about, then are you even reading because you're just kind of like reaffirming what you already know. But there's pieces of stories in the book and things that I like reading through the other dads. None of these stories I knew before editing this book. But there's aspects of each of these each of the other five dads that I had no idea of. And I'm not a fisherman. I never took to fishing, but like Javi is. And so he wrote about like his bond with his son and his dad in fishing. And so I read through that, and like the next weekend we went out and bought a fishing rod, and now I'm all about fishing. Like it's crazy how like you can kind of open your mind to what others are doing, and you could really benefit from it, and
right.
At the end of the day, like if you're a complete Neanderthal, or if you're at both ends of the spectrum, right? If you're a complete Neanderthal and just take nothing from this book, which I would find incredibly hard to believe, or you're the perfect dad and you take nothing from this book, which I would equally find very hard to believe. There's going to be something in these pages that you learn, and is it worth whatever it is, the 30, 40, whatever the cost is it worth it to you? And to me, I would pay 10 times that to learn something that I could do to better impact my kids, and it's just been incredible. I don't know. There's a lot of authors out there that'll write a book and they'll put it on a shelf and that's their bucket list item. That's I did it and on to the next thing. And I honestly, that was my hope. I was hoping that I would write a book, check it off the list and put it down. But I can't, man. I can't I can't put this down. And so I saw a meme not too long ago, and it was something along the lines of, when there's 1,000 cows in a herd that are rushing towards the cliff because that's where every other cow goes, when there's one that's going the inverse direction and running back to safety, everybody thinks they're crazy, and
right.
And so I related with that cow, like that thing resonated with me, because everybody thinks I'm, everybody doesn't think I'm crazy, but my wife thinks I'm crazy and I'm putting this much time into the book. My friends think I'm crazy and I'm putting this much time into the book. And I just, there's something here that's going to, and this is a bold statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. This book's going to change the world, man. It's going to change somebody's world.
Right.
And that's what we did it for.
Right. Well, and one thing with it is the fact that you do have so many different types of dads, and being a dad to a son is completely different than being a dad to a daughter. And the fact that you have these different dads in there, they have their different perspectives. I am a dad. I'm also, I don't like to say stepdad, but I like to call it a bonus dad. And so I went from having one son to now I have a son and a daughter, and they're about the same age, you know. And so I went from just being a dad of a son to having a daughter, and it was a whole new ball game for me, you know. And so being able to see different perspectives, it helps, because I like how you call this book, it's village wisdom. And it, you know, with it takes a village, you know, is where that comes from, I'm guessing. And, you know, and having that wisdom from all of these different people in the village to be able to help our children, because that's the key, is they're our future. So we need to make sure that we're giving them everything they need. So maybe you have something that I don't know about that's going to help me to do better for my kids, because, hey, I've been here before and this didn't work out good. I should have done this way, you know, or this actually helped a lot. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting very passionate with this too, because I love this. It's a very interesting subject, and I love it when being a dad is a big part of my life. You know, obviously with the name of my podcast being "If You Give a Dad a Podcast," I identify that's my first identity, is being a dad.
Absolutely, yeah. That's you know, and you hit the nail on the head. You know, there's so much diversity in fatherhood, you know, that there's so much. And it's truly amazing, because there are no two scenarios that are alike. And you know, it could be neighbors that grow up in the same, you know, cultural, you know, middle income, whatever, you know, village per se, and they can, you know, both sets of kids can be raised completely different, right? And it's eye-opening. So I just kind of had like a crazy thought. Okay. And you can shoot me down and we can edit this out later if this is too crazy. But can I ask you a question that I've never asked anybody before? I'm kind of curious if you've ever been asked, but I would love to hear your response and kind of go through almost what we went through with the composition of the book. Would you be open to that?
Sure. Yeah.
So my question to you is, what metrics do you think or want your children to grade you on as far as being a dad? So, you know, I would just love to hear your response, but basically, like, you know, what do you want them to grade you on as far as, you know, in 20 years, they're gonna be like, oh, my dad got a B- or an A+ or an F, you know? Yeah. Kind of curious what you would say.
What do I think that they would, or what do I want them to?
Let's go with both.
Okay. Well, so, man, that's hard.
Yeah. I want you to be vulnerable with me here.
So, I've never really thought of it like this before, you know? So how would my kids grade me, you know?
Yeah, so this entire book was based on questions like that you've hopefully never thought of before, you know? Yeah. And it kind of makes you like drill down, you know? So I saw a meme the other day that said something to the effect of, you know, the person that you are today is the person that you would have felt comfortable with when you were a kid.
Yes. Yeah. I saw
and that kind of like, that makes you drill down into like, what did I find comfort in as a child, and how did I become that person? You know, it's just like, it literally blew my mind. And so I couldn't help but post it, you know? Yeah. And so I think, you know, most of these questions are just based around things that nobody would ever think to ask you. Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, like, if I could answer, I mean, because I literally have never asked myself this, but like, you know, I would want my kids to know that, you know, to grade me on, you know, I would want my son to know that, you know, chivalry is a thing, and that, you know, even if women and men should not be treated differently, a man should always treat a woman differently. You know, like I might not always hold the door for some of my buddies, you know, I'll throw it open so they can catch it as they walk out. Yeah. But if my son doesn't hold that door for his girlfriend, his wife, like we're going to have problems, you know? Right. And
that's the way it should be.
And just, Exactly. And just please and thank you. And I will, I always get looks at the grocery store because my wife, oddly enough, just likes pushing the cart. I think as a kid, like, she must not have been allowed to push the grocery cart ever.
Yeah.
Because, whenever we're shopping, she has to be the one. Like, I'm always like, give me a turn. Like, I want to push, like I want to do the dad thing where you push it fast enough and then jump on,
Yeah.
And I never get that opportunity because she's always in the driver's seat with a cart. But I want my son to lift heavy things. I want him to, if his wife or girlfriend's struggling to bring in the groceries, she shouldn't be bringing the groceries to start, but
right.
I want him to hop in there and help. And I want him to, if he sees somebody, pulled over on the side of the street with a obviously blown tire, like, he better be the first one that's pulled over next to it and helping change that tire,
Yes.
Just things like that, and I want my daughter to, seek out, the men that are truthful and honest and open and transparent with her. If my daughter is having a bad hair day, I'm going to be the first one to tell her. Like, I'm not going to let her leave the house a mess.
Yeah.
And if I don't like the clothes that she's got on, I'm going to tell her. And I don't want somebody that's going to just either lie to her or be like, oh yeah, you look great, yada yada yada. Just give her the typical dude response just to get the hell out the door. But I want somebody that's going to respect her, and it's that example, setting, holding the door for my wife, and we're not big into like public displays of affection, but I want those kids to see me smack her butt, and I want them to see the playful side of love and the deep conversations that we have. We typically, when we're like spending time with like Javi and Danny, our friends and co-author now, but when we're spending time with them, we'll have deep conversations, and we'll allow the kids to come out there and listen to them, because we want those kids to know what's going on in the real world. We won't we try not to curse as much in front of them. I do curse a lot in front of my kids, but they know not to use those words. But like, I want them to know that we are the protectors, and we will make sure that within everything under our control, that we will be there for them. And I want them to be able to project that into the world when they're parents, and so those are kind of the metrics. And I don't even know how you would qualify or quantify any of that, but I want them to know that that's where the bar is set, and they need to push that bar higher.
Yes. I like that, and we try to do that with our kids. I want my daughter to see the way that I treat her mom, and be like, okay, that's what the bar is. I want her to find somebody who's going to respect her the way that I respect her mother, and I want my son to respect a woman the way that I respect her.
Yeah.
And so, yes, what you're saying, all things that are very important to me. I want my kids to be in a happy, healthy relationship. I've been in a relationship that ended up not being healthy. And, the thing was I got out of that relationship, because I didn't want my son growing up to think that that was okay.
Yeah.
And so,
you made the right move.
Right. And it's a hard move. I hated it at the time, but I met my wife that I have now, and it's been, it's one of the greatest things that ever happened, because I'm in a healthy relationship, now with her, and I'm able to show my son what it looks like. And I'm able to show my daughter, this is what it looks like. This is the way a man should treat you. So, yes, everything that you said was dead on with, where I would go with that.
That's awesome. And it's so, I think the coolest part about this, and one of the reasons why our village is trying to break into the podcast space as well. It's one thing to write a book, but the book's pretty limited from my sense moving forward, right? Like, I'm probably not going to write any more into it. I'll still continue to journal, but I'll tell you, my wife was an orphan somewhere around the age of 13. She lost her parents pretty young. And she ever since I've met her, we've known each other we met each other on July 4th. So how American is that, right? But we're in about 3 weeks, we're going to have known each other for 15 years. Wow. The entire time that we have known each other, she's, brought it up in conversation a few times that there's this video floating around of a Christmas that she had when she was 4, 5, 6 years old. And of course, it was shot on those missile launcher looking VHS recorders, but somewhere that video exists. And so I think it was Mother's Day. She opened up her email and one of her cousins had found it and digitized it. Oh, wow. And so we spent like an hour just watching the recording, and it was, her brother, but more importantly, both of her parents were in it. And so, there's people out there that, keep voicemails for years of their parents after they pass away, and, just being able to hear their voice. And I'll tell you, that was I think that was the first time that I've ever heard her parents' voices. And so I think it was amazing. Obviously, well, it's definitely amazing for me. Certainly amazing for her, but I think that really resonates with like podcasting. There's going to come a time where you and I don't exist any longer, right? But this audio file will. And for these kids, man, to be able to hear your voice and hear the subject matter and how much you love them and adore them, right? And can qualify the men and women that you want them to become. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff, man.
Yeah. So you did say something there. It's funny that you said y'all met on 4th of July weekend. My wife and I, our first date was on 4th of July weekend. So,
awesome. So that's what's up.
Yeah. But no.
What was your first date?
So it was very laid back. We went to a place called the Great American Taco Company and had tacos, because that's like my wife's love language is tacos. And then we went to a local coffee shop and sat outside, and we could see fireworks from the coffee shop where we were sitting at. So
cool.
Oh yeah. And I'm a nerdy guy and everything, and I like all kinds of geeky stuff. And one of the things that she asked me when we sat down to have coffee was, she was like, do you like Doctor Who or Firefly? And I was like, this woman is the one. When she said that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because we immediately had something in common there. So that was really cool.
That's really neat. That's dope, man. That's cool.
Yeah. So you said you guys met on 4th of July weekend. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, back in the day, this is pre Tinder and Bubble or whatever apps these kids are using nowadays. It makes me feel old. Yeah. But at the time, and it was happenstance, dude. When my wife lost her parents, she spent a few months here in Texas, and went to live with her cousin in Washington and in Seattle, close to Seattle. And she went to high school up there. And meanwhile, I was deciding to join the Army on the other coast. I was in New Jersey. Oh. And I enlisted. They shipped me off to Missouri for basic training. And part of like the recruitment process is like, do you want to see the world? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And so we're in basic, there's like 30 or 40 people in our bay, and they're handing out assignments. They're like, Rogers, you got South Korea, and, Henry, you're going to Germany, and whoever else, you're going to Italy, yada, yada. And then they're like, they list off 8 of us. And the 8 of us ended up going to Fort Hood, Texas. And we're like, man, we ain't seeing the world. but
you might get to see some cows or something. But
yeah. But so they shipped me down to Texas, and I was working a lot. When you're in the Army, and this is funny too, but when I joined the Army, I was clueless and naive, and I had no idea that you could bring anything. And so at the time, I didn't have much, but at the time, I sold everything. I mean, I like to play guitar, and I sold my guitar.
No.
I sold my car, clothes. I mean, I sold everything. And just because I didn't think you could bring anything. And so we show up to basic. Everybody's in their cars. They've all got these, boxes and boxes of stuff that they're bringing into the barracks.
Yeah.
And I had a duffel bag, dude. It was so pathetic.
Oh, but, you've been watching Band of Brothers, man.
Yeah. But that's the lifestyle that I bought into. I promise you that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So we ended up meeting on Yahoo Personals, dude, years ago, back when that was a thing. And so, we both had like profiles up, and man, if the world's different now, I would never put my picture and phone number up on some website now, but yeah, so we met each other on Yahoo Personals, and we sent a couple like DMs, or I think they were just called emails back then.
Yeah.
But we corresponded with each other, and at the time, again, I didn't have a car, so like I was, my wife, and we joke about it, but she probably thought I was rich because I would drive up to see her. She was in Waco. She just happened to come back to Texas after high school and go to college, and she didn't have to make that decision, and I obviously didn't have to make the decision to go to the military. But we both kind of showed up in Texas at the right time. And when I was driving up to see her, so that 4th of July weekend, I drove up in a buddy's Trailblazer, and I paid him, I don't know, I paid him like $20 to rent his car essentially. And I told him, when you're in the lower ranks of enlisted military, you don't make much. So $20 at the time was significant.
Yes.
And I told him I'd fill up his gas tank when I got back, and so we met on the 4th of July, and the next weekend I borrowed another buddy's car, so I showed up in like a Camaro.
Yeah.
And so every other weekend I'm showing up. Yeah. So I maybe I tricked her into becoming my wife. I don't know, man.
Oh, that's great.
It's great and pathetic in the same sentence,
It sounds like it was meant to be, man.
For sure.
So getting back into there's a couple questions I wanted to ask you specifically about the book. What would you say is the hardest thing to write about in the book for you?
Yeah, man, I've brought this up on numerous occasions, but I think it's significant. And it was me being very vulnerable, but I had to do it because I think it can help somebody else. And so this is the story. I was having a pretty rough day. At the time I was working from home, and my quote unquote office is in my bedroom, and I would leave the bedroom and then step into dad mode immediately. There's no time to wind up or wind down. And so I was having a rough day, and the kids did something to push me over the edge. I can't remember if they spilled water, or a water bottle, a Gatorade bottle, whatever it was, or they're arguing. I don't know, but it was enough for me to just blow my top. And so I teed off on them verbally. I would never touch them physically, but I imagine that this is what you call verbal assault. I teed off on him for a few minutes, probably a minute or two, of just like screaming at him, like, why would you do that? Yada, 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 go to your room, you go to your room, And I remember like I had to leave that day for fingerprints, or I had to go do something for my job. I work for a public safety company, so getting fingerprinted was like my secondary job.
Yeah.
But so I had to go do a background check, get fingerprints. And I remember basically leaving for the day. It was in Houston, so it was a bit of a drive for me. And so I left for the day, and the entire day was just shot, man. I could not, to this day, I still haven't forgiven myself. And I think what I did was unforgivable, just yelling at your kids like that. Yeah. And so all day long, I just kicked around in my head, like, how am I ever going to apologize? What do I say? What can I say? And so, fast forward to I'm driving down my driveway. I get out of the car. I walk in the house, and my mind's going a mile a minute. I'm like, how am I going to apologize to my son? And so I walk into his room, he's playing an Xbox, he's playing Call of Duty or whatever, Minecraft. And I'm like, hey man, I want to talk about earlier. And he takes his headphones off and he's like, yes, Dad. And he's all chipper.
Yeah.
And in that moment, and so my son forgets nothing. Like he is a sponge and he just picks things up so quick.
Right.
So he didn't forget that morning. He forgave me that morning.
Yeah.
And I was just absolutely blown away at his ability to forgive. That he loves me, dude.
Yeah.
Like I tear up every time I think about that story, but that little kid loves me, man. It was just
that's such a great
it's just
story.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Yeah.
And I think it's the power. I don't know what it is, but I'm hoping that somebody listening to that right now can think about a time that either they made the same mistake as I did or have been tempted to, and they withdraw from it, because that's no way to raise a kid, and you don't want them to have those lasting memories, and I hope somebody learns something from that story.
Wow. It's a very powerful story, because kids, they're resilient, but at the same time, it pains you when something like that happens, and I don't know how many times I've, looked back and been like, was I too hard on them? You question yourself a lot, because there's no formal training for being a dad. You're pretty much winging it and going off of what you learned from your dad, and so man, that speaks a lot, because I've been in that situation myself.
Yeah, I imagine every dad has, and I've thought long and hard about that moment. The moment I wrote it, I was like, I don't know if this is a mistake or not, but I'm not deleting it. And I was the one that had to go back and edit it, and so I had to reread that 6 times, 7 times, and I've let that marinate in my head so much. And I think part of thinking about it so much, kind of like it kind of like solidifies the thought that I feel like I'm a good dad. I don't think I'm a great dad, just because I feel like there's so much to learn about fatherhood.
Yeah.
But it's the dads that think about how they're dadding that are the good ones, man. I grew up in a split household where my parents were divorced by the time I was 4, 5, 6, around the same age that that video was taken of my wife on Christmas. But my stepdad left much to be desired, and I didn't really see my bio dad, my real dad. I didn't really see him often. It was more of like a weekend warrior type, but my stepdad was a jerk, man. I just never really got along, and really to this day I just don't really get along with him, because I don't agree with his parenting.
Right.
But I started thinking about how, like, I don't think my stepdad ever thought about how he fathers. He never gave it a second thought. His actions were his actions.
Yeah.
And he would say or do things, but he would never think and kind of like critique or introspectively kind of look at how he's doing things. And I think in the effort to become a better dad, I think you have to do like retrospectives and analyze yourself, and that's in anything, whether you're trying to learn something, you take tests, or you're trying to be a good husband, you ask your wife what she wants out of a good husband,
yeah,
and that can take many different flavors, but many different forms. But there's nobody to really tell you or to quantify how good or bad of a dad you're being other than yourself. And so by being able to kind of take a look back at what you've done, I think that's really like the delineator of being a good dad or not.
So I've got a few more questions, because I know we're coming up here on an hour and everything, and that's usually what I kind of keep the podcast at. If I go over it, that's fine. I've had some that were closer to 2 hours even. But I do have a few more questions I'd like to ask you about. What would you say is probably one of the easier subjects that you've had to write about in there?
Yeah, I think some of the easier stuff is like, like what kind of what makes your kids so great, like the stuff that you see on a daily basis that what makes them special, or gosh, I'm pretty emotionally charged after that reliving that moment. So you have to forgive me if I can't remember all the questions, but we there are aspects of the book where we talk about what makes the kids worth fathering for, and that stuff was really easy just because you see them on a daily basis. And I'll tell you, it's those moments where you're laying on the bed and the kid, my daughter runs in and she hops on top of me like, what are you watching? And you just lay there, cuddling or whatever, just watching a show. And it's those moments where those kids aren't even thinking about that moment. They're solely based on what's on that TV.
Yep.
And you as a dad are watching the TV, but you couldn't even, if somebody offered me $1 million to tell you what's going on in this show, I would have zero clue. I would be the biggest loser, my eyes are looking at that TV, but my mind is wrapped up in this little girl's heart. Oh man, it's those types of moments that are so easy to write about just because they happen so often, and it's really easy for me to say that now, but it's so scary to think that in 10, 12 years, those moments aren't happening anymore. They're going to grow up and they're going to move out and they're going to do their own thing. And man, it's so amazing and so scary in the same breath. It's wild, but they are easy to write about, because you just experience them every day.
Yeah, it's great because I'm seeing your face as you're talking about this, and you can see that you're almost reliving those moments in your head as you're talking about them. So,
of course.
And, I'm sitting here thinking about the times that's happened. One of my favorite pictures that my wife took, it was, I don't even remember what the movie was, but I was showing it to my kids for the first time, and they had never seen it before, and it's one from my childhood. And she took a picture, and I have both of them sitting on my lap with their favorite blankets over them. And we're just sitting there, all three of us together on the couch, watching that together.
So cool.
Never can forget that moment, because it's one of the greatest ever. I, for one, I'm sharing a piece of my childhood with them, but at the same time, it's just that moment of being there together, So I totally get that. It just brings you right out. So.
In some ways, I kind of think this book is anti-social media, social media, it brings you closer to this fictional dreamland of seeing everybody in their best moments.
Mm-hmm.
But that day to day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's either fake or it's the primo moment, you take 50 pictures and you sort through the best one you can find. And you're post with an emoji or a hashtag, and it's those moments where you're 100% committed to being present.
Mm-hmm.
It's those moments that are the most beautiful, dude.
Right. Yeah,
so cool stuff.
There's a part of, you have a website, and you have a thing on there called the Village Wisdom Journey. And I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. That's kind of where people can put in their thoughts on your website as well, right?
Yeah. So what the plans are there, and that's kind of half baked right now. It's in an alpha status. My background's in software engineering, and I'm not a great software engineer just because I haven't been practicing. But Journey is so. In creating this book, I was kind of the quarterback, right? Kind of calling all the shots and the plays and curating all of the responses that the other dads sent in. And it's a lot of work, man. It's like herding wet cats. And it's just a ton of work. If I would have known how much work it was going into it, I probably would have never done it, in all honesty. But I was committed. We were publicly committed, and I just had to do it.
Right.
And so it was a ton of work, but I feel like the payoff at the end by going 30 days, and I think this is another aspect of the book and really Journey as well, is that, in writing for 30 days for 30 to 45 minutes a day, and you might not write for that long, maybe it takes you 10 minutes to write, but you're certainly going to think about that question each day for 30 to 45 minutes at least,
Right.
But by cognitively thinking about how you can become a better parent, or reflecting on how you've parented thus far, it does something to you. And my degree's not in psychology, and so I don't know what exactly it does. I would love to talk to a psychologist to figure out what it is, but it really improved my ability to be a father by doing that. And so what Journey is it's going to be the same thing, but without the headache of organizing it. So essentially, you'll sign up. You would, tell me how many other dads you want to do it with, what their emails are, and then, we'll send you out some questions like, how would you be graded as a parent, or, what legacy do you want to leave behind for your kid? Just crazy questions that I promise you nobody's ever asked you, or you'd never thought about that deeply before. And then essentially, the end user would go through a very similar, if not the exact same process that we went through. And that's part of changing the world too, man. If we can change the world one dad at a time, I'm happy with that. And I think it's, that's why we called it Journey. But I'm hoping that as many dads as I talk to will sign up for it. We haven't, like I said, it's an alpha right now. We're still kind of working out the kinks, and we should be in beta soon, but I'm kind of targeting a release for the next couple of months. But yeah, a big part of this book was, my mom read it, and the very next morning she spent the weekend at our house, and I was cheap and didn't want to pay for the $15 to send it to her in Florida. So I waited for her to come, but I handed her the book. She woke up the next morning and she was like, "Hey, we got to talk." And there was my mom has obviously known me my entire life, and there was things that she learned and things that, she questioned and was like, "Why did you feel this way?" Yeah. And that just opened doors to relationships that I've had for years, decades. Yeah. And honestly, the same with my wife. She read it, she helped edit it. And, it was like, I have questions. And I kept hearing that, like, I have questions. And I was like, damn, like this book it's obviously it's about fatherhood, and we're doing the motherhood one coming up. But I think it's really about relationship enrichment, I think is what it boils down to, because my relationship with my wife, with my mom, with these 5 other dads, with my kids, all of it has been enriched so much because of this one stupid little idea I had in the middle of the night while journaling, and, some would call it an aha moment, but, if it can assist anybody, like I would feel guilty by not pursuing it. So we're going to throw it together and hope, others out there take the same journey.
Yeah. Well, and I know it was crowdfunded as well. I think you did, what did you just give people just the idea of the book and just reach out to certain ones, or how did you go about that?
Yeah, so originally it was just going to be us. Well, I guess the OG idea was just me. I was gonna journal for a year, and then print out the blog, every post from the blog, and put it in a book and give it to my kids. I was going to make 2 copies, and that was going to be the end of it. Yeah. And then I got the other dads on board, and so 2 copies became 8 copies or 10 copies, whatever, a copy for each dad. Yeah. And in conversation, we'd be at the pool just kind of like talking about like concepts for the book. Somebody would overhear, come swim over, and be like, "I want one," and we'd be like, "You do?" And so enough people did that where we were like, all right, I mean, I guess we'll try. And so we set up a Kickstarter, and people loved it, and it successfully funded over 100%. Wow. And that, man, we're off to the races, and we haven't stopped running. It's been a wild ride.
That's awesome. Yeah. So we're coming up on a close here. I got a few more questions for you. Where can we find this book if somebody wants to buy it?
Yeah, so you can find it at Barnes and Noble. I think it's only on their site now. It's on Amazon as well, but I'll tell you, it does the Village. It does us better if you buy it directly from us. So the website's village-wisdom.com. And then we're really starting to get active on Instagram and Facebook. You can find us, you just search Village Wisdom for Facebook, but our Instagram handle is village.wisdom.
Okay. And if there was one thing out of this book, if nobody gets anything out of it, is there one thing that maybe you want them to take away from this whole thing?
Yeah, I think I want fathers to be more vulnerable and open. For the longest time, and I saw it with my own two dads, I guess. And really with being raised, I would go over friends' houses and friends had really good relationships with their dads. But fatherhood's such a weird thing. You spend a lot of time, keeping your kids safe and teaching them things like how to change oil in a car, how to change a tire, how to change a guitar string, how to change the air filter in the house. Yeah. I'm still teaching my wife where the lint vent is on our dryer, but you teach all like the basics for survival, but there's so much more to being a dad that gets overlooked, man. There's a lot of stuff that we bury deep down. Case in point, like, when I come home from work, I've spent 8, 9, 10 hours at work, an hour or two before work getting the kids ready, doing the dishes, doing chores, and then an hour or two after work, like taking the kids to soccer practice or band practice or whatever. There's not a whole lot of time for me. So when I get home, I just want to like do me stuff, right. But those kids still need us, so we push through that internal kind of like very selfish urge to like feel like you've earned like 30 minutes for yourself,
Yeah.
But by being a dad, like, you haven't earned that, and you never will. Like, for the rest of your life, you will never earn those 30 minutes. Those, if you get any time to yourself, like, that's a privilege that your family members have given to you, and to not take that for granted. Right. But we're kind of like captive in our own heads, in the sense that dads typically don't share those kinds of feelings with other people. It's just kind of like understood, like, we're dads, we're supposed to do this stuff, so we do it.
Yep.
But by being able to share those types of thoughts and experiences and stories, I really hope it makes other dads more transparent and willing to learn, because the only way that we become better dads is by learning. And if I die with all this knowledge, I don't have much. I mean, my kids are 7 and 9. If I don't have much knowledge at all, but if I die with this knowledge and it's siloed and it goes nowhere, what good is it doing? Yeah. And so I'm hoping that my story in general, curated with those 5 other dads' stories, it does somebody some good.
All right, man. Well, John, it has been wonderful talking to you tonight. You brought up a lot of great stuff, and I hope that the people listening to this go out and get this book. What's the website again?
Yep, it's village-wisdom.com.
All right. You have a great night, and I can't wait to read more of this book, man.
Thanks, Jared. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the Vinyl Word Podcast, where forgotten spoken word records are revisited with a comedic twist. Join me, Steve Beach.
And me, Brian Mayer, for a trip down memory lane, where records weren't only for music, but also education.
Learn to bowl, throw a dinner party, or hit a baseball, all while being tethered to a spinning record on a gigantic stereo.
It was well-intentioned, ineffective, and totally ridiculous. But what other options did they have? And let's be honest, Steve, we can describe the internet the same way.
Yeah. Listen to the Vinyl Word Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Pocket Cast, iHeartRadio.
Literally anywhere they get their podcast is what
Stitcher,
we're doing.
Deezer.
Hey, listener. This is a not paid for product placement for the Zero to Hero podcast.
What do you
If
mean
you
not
definitely
paid?
like what you're listening to now, come on over to the
How the
Zero to
fuck am I
Hero
keeping my
podcast.
lights on? Just
Anywhere you want to be able to find your podcast
the
at,
trash bills
like
due
Apple
next week.
Podcasts,
What
Spotify,
Hey,
Amazon Podcasts,
How the
and
hell
Google
am I gonna keep
Podcasts,
my
which
god
still a little
boys in
weird.
for the next 2 weeks? All
Come
the
on over
pre-orders are
and
starting to
enjoy
fucking
yourself
drop.
and listen to Billy and myself bicker, argue, and, well,
Speaking of
fight
dog,
about a lot of
no
things,
goddamn
as
dog
we are
food
the
for
bulk
the
and
next
skull
2
of
weeks.
podcasting.
How the hell am I
Good
gonna
luck
get
out there,
money
and
for
welcome back to the show.
All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that episode with John Christensen. He was a lot of fun to talk to. He was a great guest, and I look forward to speaking with him more in the future and maybe trying to get involved with getting this book out there more, because I do feel that this book is important and it will help a lot of dads out there. And it's always to have good information and have that village mentality when it comes to raising our children, because sometimes it does take a village to raise a child. And just really glad that I was able to have this guy on. So I've got some really good guests that are coming up, and if you guys want to know who I'm going to have on next, make sure that you're following me on all the different social medias. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Snapchat, and I am on TikTok. Follow me on all those places. You can also find me on YouTube. Starting to try to put in like some little shorts and things like that I get from my TikTok and all that. So make sure that you're following me on there as well. It's a lot of fun, and I also upload these podcast episodes on there. There's no video yet, but they are on there if you prefer to listen to your podcasts on YouTube. I love doing this. It's so much fun. And like I said, follow me on all the different social media so you can make sure that you are staying up to date with who is going to be on next, or with anything that's going on with the show as well. I did announce that right now, this month, you can get a t-shirt. And with the purchase of a t-shirt, you will get a free sticker. Make sure that you take me up on that offer and get your merch for iGetApp. Going back to what I was saying before, if you want to follow me on all of those, just look up If You Give a Dad a Podcast. You can also Google it and find me on there. I will have a Linktree in my show notes that will help you to be able to follow me on all of the different social medias, and you'll be able to find your preferred method of listening to the show there on my Linktree as well. As you're listening to this episode, I want you to go out and rate it and review it for me, please. Make sure that you let me know what you think of this episode. If I'm doing okay, if I'm not. If you don't like it, then tell me. If you do like it, then tell me. The more people that rate and review this show, the more visible I am to new listeners. And trying to get more people here to listen all the time. I do appreciate those who have rated and reviewed the show. And just continue to support this and share it around. Make sure that you're subscribed on whatever app that you're using to listen to this, and hit that notification bell. That way that you know when the new episodes come out. I'm looking into doing some other things to kind of get the word out there with the podcast as well. I also might be having some different merch that's coming out. I might be getting some magnets and some coffee mugs going as well. So if that's something you guys would like to see, make sure and let me know. You can also reach out to me through my email, and that's giveadatapodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you guys. I enjoy talking to you, and I've gotten many different guests to come on the show because of that email address. So it's something I use regularly. I have it set up to where you send me something, I'll see it immediately, and unless I'm sleeping, and I'll try to respond as quickly as I can to you guys. I just want to say thank you to everybody. You guys have been great. And continue to send me that stuff. Continue to send me your messages. Continue to send me your emails. Things like that. That way I can interact with you guys, because it does make my day when I get to hear from each and every one of you. I'm also part of 2 podcast networks, and that is the OIW Podcast Network and the Avenue Podcast Network. I love being part of both of them. They have all kinds of different podcasts for you to listen to on there. I will have links to both of them in my show notes. You can find all kinds of different podcasts on there as well. I also want to give a shout out to one of my new favorite podcasts that I listen to a lot, and that is the Zeo to Hero podcast. I'm actually part of their Discord, and I'm going to be going on their podcast as this is airing. I've already recorded my episode with them, and very excited to be on their show. So make sure that you tune into their show next week if you want to hear me talk to them. They're two really awesome guys. They call them the Bulk and Skull of podcasting. So make sure you tune in with that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then in August, I believe it is, I'm going to have both those guys on my show to, just have a good talk. That's what I like to do. And that's what I'm going to do with them, I believe. So yeah, make sure you tune into that and make sure you listen to their podcast because they have a highly entertaining show. And I look forward to it every week. And last, I want to give a shout out to D-Cure. He is the guy who made my ending theme song. Whenever you hear me say I love you guys at the end of the show, that is the song that starts, made by D-Cure. If you like that song, make sure you go out and follow him. Thank you for making this show as awesome as it is. If it wasn't for you guys, I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't have the show that I have today. I love you guys. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Bye.
I'm in my room grounded, but I got a podcast on. He calls us beautiful people, then tells us who we have on. The best part of my day, the world blocked out in my pods. Tell my friends all about it so that they follow along. And the host is kinda nerdy, but guess what I am as well. I don't feel so alone and I began walking out of my shell. Heard a story, I needed connection I haven't felt. I'll be looking for the next one, till then farewell. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. Listen closely, download and tune in remotely. It's the podcast for me. Have it on, better go see. And listen closely, download and tune in remotely.
This podcast is part of the OIW Podcasting Network.